Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a real classic, maybe even an underdog from the 70s, the Electro Harmonix Badstone.
Ah, the bad stone.
Right. In a time when, simpler effects were often king, this pedal, it did something different. It really sparked some creativity for players who got it.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just gear, isn't it? It's a story about innovation kind of pushing against the grain and how sometimes the biggest impact isn't always the most mainstream.
Absolutely.
So let's unpack this. We're using Electro Harmonix Badstone, an exhaustive history, as our guide today to figure out what made this phaser so unique.
It's a great one to explore. By the mid-'70s, phasers were already pretty essential. You heard them everywhere in the rock, funk.
Yeah, that swirling sound was defining the era.
Exactly. But the Badstone, which EHX founder Mike Matthews and engineer David Cockrell cooked up around 75, wasn't just another flavor of that. It was deliberately aiming somewhere else.
No. Okay, aiming somewhere else. I like that. So how did they do that? What were the actual design choices that made it stand out from, say, the really popular ones?
Well, it really comes down to two main things, both pretty radical back then. First, it was a 6-stage phaser, not the usual 4. And second, maybe even more importantly, was the manual sweep control.
Ah, okay.
These weren't just tweaks. They really changed how you could use a phaser.
Right. Let's start with the 6 stages then, because 4 stages, like the phase 90, that's what most people think of, yeah? What's the deal with adding 2 more?
So more stages mean more notches in the frequency spectrum that get swept. A 4-stage gives you basically 2 main notches moving around. That's your classic kind of gentle phase sound.
Okay.
The Badstone, with 6 stages, created 3 notches. And that difference, well, it sounds richer, deeper. It's a more complex, almost 3-dimensional kind of swirl compared to the 4-stage ones.
So a richer, more textured sound just from the basic architecture?
Yeah, exactly. It gave it this lush-ness that was pretty sophisticated for the time.
Okay, that makes sense. But then you mentioned the manual sweep control. You said it was groundbreaking. Why was that such a big deal?
This was the real game changer. Yeah. See, most phasers have an LFO, right? A low-frequency oscillator just sweeping back and forth automatically. You set the speed, and off it goes.
Mm-hmm. Predictable.
Predictable. The Badstone let you turn that off. With the manual knob, you could literally stop the sweep, freeze the filter at any point in its cycle.
Whoa. Okay, so instead of just the whoosh, you could just hold a specific part of that sound.
Precisely. You could park it right on a resonant peak or in a deep notch. Imagine freezing that wave.
Huh?
This gave you access to these sustained filter tones that usually needed, synths or complicated studio gear.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. It's not just a dynamic effect anymore. You could make it static. How did that change how people used it?
Totally. It transformed it from just being about movement into, a static resonant filter. You could dial in these specific frozen filter tones. Think of it like having a sort of fixed wah pedal or a really focused EQ boost or cut that you could just leave on.
Like a parametric EQ almost, but with that phaser flavor?
Kind of, yeah. Before the Badstone, getting that kind of fixed resonant sound often meant juggling multiple pedals or studio tricks. This put it right there in one box on your board. It really expanded the sonic palette in real time.
Okay, I can see why it got called the thinking player's phaser then. It wasn't just set and forget.
Exactly. That name fits perfectly because it asked a bit more of you. You had to think about where you wanted to park that sound.
Right.
And because you could lock it, it blurred the lines. Is it a phaser? Is it a filter? Is it an EQ? It could kind of be all 3.
That's fascinating. So it wasn't just about the manual mode. It still had the standard controls, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was flexible. You had an auto manual switch right there, so you could flip between the normal LFO sweep and the frozen manual mode instantly.
Okay.
And in auto mode, you had the rate knob, just like you'd expect, controlling the speed of that sweep. Slow and gooey or fast and choppy.
And feedback. Phasers always have that feedback control, which can get pretty wild.
Crucial, yeah. The feedback knob here controlled the resonance, how peaky those filter notches were, crank it up, and the Badstone could get really vocal, almost metallic sounding. It could even get close to self-oscillation, which gives you those really intense ringing sweeps.
So it could do subtle, but it could also get pretty extreme.
Definitely. It covered both bases, the classic sounds, and this whole other world of texture.
Okay, so we know how it worked. But let's talk sound. What were its defining tonal characteristics?
Well, in auto mode, like I said, it had that classic swoosh, but definitely with more depth. That 6-stage design gave it a richer, more complex feel than a lot of its peers. Just a bit more Luxurious, maybe?
Luxurious, I like that. A three-dimensional quality you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. You can get warm, slow phases or faster, more warbly stuff. Pretty versatile just in that mode.
But the real magic, the unique stuff, was in that manual mode, right? Those vocal filter-like tones.
That's where its personality really came out. Yeah, engaging manual mode opened up totally different possibilities. You could dial in sounds that hinted at, like an envelope filter or parked wah, but without needing to rock your foot.
So you could get those ooh or ah sounds just by setting the knob.
Pretty much. By finding the right spot with a manual knob, maybe adding some feedback, you could get those fixed vowel-like sounds. And yeah, push that feedback high. And it went beyond just swooshing into those really resonant, almost metallic sweeps. Very striking, very aggressive if you wanted it to be.
That definitely sounds like something more experimental artists would gravitate towards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That manual control made it a favorite for players who didn't just want effects, but wanted tools for sound design. Avant-garde players, people who treated pedals almost like instruments themselves.
Yeah.
And connecting it to the bigger picture, this really fostered a bit of a cult following. Guitarists and bands looking for something different, something to really manipulate. They weren't after the easy option.
And you can definitely hear that kind of thinking in certain players. Tom Verlaine from television comes to mind. His guitar sound on Marquee Moon often has that very specific, almost sculpted phasing texture. It doesn't just wash over everything.
That's a perfect example. Verlaine used effects with such precision. The Badstone's ability to create those frozen resonant tones would have been ideal for his style, finding just the right harmonic emphasis within a chord.
Right.
And beyond him, you had crush rock bands, lots of experimental groups really jumping on it. That frozen sweep mode was perfect for creating synth-like textures on guitar, which fit right into their aesthetic.
Blurring the lines between guitar and synth again?
Exactly. It became a tool for sound design as much as a standard guitar effect. Perfect for bands pushing boundaries.
Okay, so this really cool, innovative pedal, how did it actually do, commercially speaking? The original was in that big EHX box, right? From 75 to the early 80s.
Yeah, the classic big box enclosure. And it had a decent production run, but, well, it's kind of a classic story. Despite all its cool features, it got overshadowed commercially by simplicity, basically. The MXR Phase 90, the orange one everyone knows, was just simpler, one knob, pretty much one sound, easier to use, maybe cheaper, definitely had wider distribution.
So the Phase 90 was the mass market hit.
Yeah, it just outsold the Badstone by a significant margin. But, and this is the interesting part, those players who did want more control, more personality, who were willing to dig in a bit, they often sought out the Badstone.
The thinking players.
Exactly. They saw the value in that versatility. It makes you wonder, what does success really mean for musical gear? Is it just sales numbers, or is it the creative doors it opens, even for a smaller group?
That's a great point. And the Badstone story didn't just end in the 80s, did it? It had a comeback.
It did. Like a lot of cool vintage EHX stuff, it developed this cult following. People started hunting them down. Then you saw these sporadic reissues pop up in the late 90s, the 2000s, as interest grew again.
Collectors and new generations discovering it.
Right. And that whole thing really peaked, I'd say, in 2014 when EHX released the Nano Badstone.
Ah, the small one.
Yeah. They basically put the original circuit, or faithful recreation of it, into their standard small nano box. Modern power jack, pedal board friendly size.
Made it accessible again?
Totally. It sparked this whole second wave of appreciation. Indie bands, revivalists, people looking for that quirky vibe, but maybe couldn't find or afford an original. The Nano made it happen. It showed that unique character was still really relevant.
So wrapping this up then, the Badstone, it really did carve out its own special niche, didn't it? That 6-stage depth, the manual sweep. It proved that versatility and a unique personality could have a lasting impact, even without topping the charts initially.
Absolutely. It fundamentally showed how a pedal could blur lines, phaser, filter, EQ all in one box. That's why experimental players loved it, and why its influence stretches from the 70s right up to that Nano reissue today. It's just great engineering meeting artistic possibility.
Yeah, it's a tool story, and it kind of reminds us that sometimes the gear with the deepest impact isn't the most popular one, but the one that gives artists a truly different tool, something that makes them think and explore. It makes you wonder what other overlooked gems are out there waiting for their deep dive. We'll see you next time.